Good morning, class. Today's lesson, we're going to first look at Mendel, who we name or we call the father of genetics. We're going to look at some brief history. So the first thing I want you to do is take out your Bell worksheet. Make sure you write down the date, the topic, and the problem. I have that here for you. Today's date is 11/23. Today's topic is going to be Punnett practice. Today's problem, of which you should be able to answer by the end of the lesson, is who was Gregor Mendel? Take a minute to write those things down on Monday's box of your Bell worksheet. Okay, so for today's Bell work, your assignment is going to be watch this bio, which talks a little bit about Mendel and the history, and to write 5 facts about Mendel.
In the middle of the 19th century, an Augustinian monk named Gregor Mendel took up the question of biological inheritance with a series of experiments. Mendel had a naturally inquisitive mind and a profound love of nature. His scientific interests ranged from research on plants to meteorology and the theories of evolution. Working at a monastery in what is now the Czech Republic, Mendel started by crossbreeding different strains of garden peas, then observing the characteristics of their offspring. Why choose peas? He did it, he said, for the fun of the thing. Mendel noticed that when he crossed a round pea seed with a wrinkled one, the offspring were round, not a mix of the two characteristics as he had expected. Yet when he bred the round pea offspring, that's where the mix appeared, and the second generation had both round and wrinkled seeds. He continued to experiment, trying to understand what kind of biological mechanism would cause certain characteristics to disappear in the first generation, only to reappear in the second. Then one day, Mendel counted the number of peas in the second generation that had the wrinkled characteristic. Exactly 1/4 of the peas were wrinkled. What Mendel observed in his experiments were the biological phenomena we now refer to as dominance and segregation, only Mendel didn't know it yet. Still, his experiments produced a curious set of facts which, as he said, forced themselves upon my notice. You see, no matter how he crossbred the various strains of peas, the hidden characteristics showed up, but only in 1/4 of the second generation. For Mendel, here was the breakthrough. For the first time, he could demonstrate that the traits of successive generations were inherited in certain numerical ratios. In other words, there were fixed laws of nature that governed heredity. With this insight, Mendel made the first great discovery in the science of genetics. Each inherited characteristic must be decided by a pair of what he called factors. Each parent, he said, contributes one factor for each characteristic. Certain factors are dominant and others recessive. Depending on the combination of the factors the offspring inherits. Mendel's factors are called genes. The term Mendelian trait is used to describe a characteristic caused by a single gene that sometimes reappears in 1/4 of the offspring. That characteristic can be innocuous, such as freckles or the ability to curl your tongue. But it also can lead to serious illnesses like cystic fibrosis or Tay-Sachs disease. Imagine all that from one man's work with the humble pea, and it was experiments with another humble species that produced our next great discovery.
Okay, hopefully you got down at least 5 facts about Gregor Mendel. Hopefully those facts include that he was an Austrian monk who studied genetics in the 1800s. His first study was of pea plants. He studied inheritance and determined that there were things called alleles or factors that determined the offspring's genetic or genome, genotype, I meant to say. All of those things are good. Okay, so now what I would like you to do is make sure you take out your notes packet. The first page of the notes packet looks like this. It's the fill-in packet, and we're going to go over it together. Okay, so just to recap, we've already talked about that genetics is the study of heredity. Heredity is passing on traits from parents to offspring. The traits are the characteristics that you see, and we just discussed some of those traits like being able to roll your tongue or if you have attached earlobes or not. We talked about DNA and chromosomes and how the chromosomes are actually what is our blueprint and making up what we are, our DNA. We talked about different organisms and species having a different number of chromosomes and knowing that in our body cells that humans will have 46 chromosomes and in our sex cells they would only have 23. We also talk about genes and how the alleles, you'll have 2 for each, 1 from each parent. And we also talked about DNA. So it's important to realize that this is all true now, but this is something that we know DNA and we discovered much later than Mendel. So going back to Mendel and his study of peas, he looked at the very, very specific things. He figured out that some things are dominant and some things are recessive. Remember that dominant is always going to show and recessive is going to be hidden. We also remember we represent dominant with a capital and lowercase letter for recessive. We also use the word homozygous, having 2 of the same like genes. So you can be homozygous dominant. That would be 2 capitals or 2 dominant. You could be homozygous recessive. That would be 2 lowercase. You could be a hybrid or heterozygous, and that would be 2 different. So that would be like having 1 dominant and 1 recessive. Just remember, for your phenotype, your physical appearance, whenever you have a dominant trait, it will show itself. Recessive is hidden. So the only way to show a recessive trait, like blonde hair, is to have 2 recessive genes in your genotype, okay, which is your genetic makeup or gene pairs. All right. So phenotype is your physical appearance, and we did this the other day, but let's just make sure you have it in your notes. So if you have capital B, you're homozygous, you have brown hair. If you have recessive, you're homozygous, but you have blonde hair. And if you are hybrid, you're heterozygous, and you'll still show brown hair. Okay, physical phenotype. Okay, you guys just watch this. If you need to watch it again, it's there. If not, we're going to move on. It's in your notes. Okay, so Punnett squares we discussed in the last video, and we're going to go and practice those again and then talk about the probability, so how we can find information about after we create a Punnett square. So a Punnett square is a way to determine the probable genotype and phenotype of offspring. Okay, so here's one example. We have capital F, which is dominant for purple flowers, and we have lowercase f, which is recessive for yellow flowers. This is representing the parents. So if we are to cross what we're going to call one heterozygous parent with another heterozygous parent, and I'm calling them that because I see they have 1 dominant and 1 recessive, 2 different genes, then they have 2, then they're called hybrid or heterozygous. The phenotype, these are the gene pairs, but the phenotype of these parents are purple. I know this because they have that dominant trait, okay? So let's try and cross them and see what happens. So we're going to take this parent and put 1 of each gene in the top of the Punnett square. Then we're going to take this parent, parent number 2, and we're going to put 1 of each genotype in the end of the Punnett square. Notice, keeping the center of the Punnett square empty, because that is our possible offspring. So we're going to bring across this capital F and bring down this capital F to fill in that box. So this is showing that this possible offspring could get 2 dominant traits, 1 from parent 1 and 1 from parent 2. Here we're going to do the same thing. Capital F, lowercase f. And we're going to go down to this box. Take a second. What do you think it's going to be? 1 and 1. Just be careful because we do put the capital letter first. And we do that like a formatting thing, just like you do with your first name. Okay, last box, Give you a second. Bring this down, this across. We should have two little f's, or two recessive, or homozygous recessive. So I'm going to go over what this box represents. This box says that there's a possibility of an offspring, and each box is 25%, just like 4 quarters and a dollar. There's 4 of them. So this shows a 25% chance of an offspring with homozygous dominant purple flowers, meaning 2 dominant genes. This one shows a hybrid, 25% chance that they could have an offspring with 1 dominant and 1 recessive. This box shows the same as this and is also worth 25%. So each box is worth 25%. It shows a hybrid, it shows a dominant gene and a recessive gene in a possible offspring. And this one shows that there's a possible offspring, again, a 25% chance that they could receive as an offspring 2 recessive yellow flower genes. So, what is the probability of the flower being purple? They're talking about the offspring. They're talking about the phenotype, okay? So, what's the phenotype or color of this flower? Well, I hope you guessed that since it has a capital, even though it has 2, it doesn't matter. Even you just need 1, it will be purple. This one has a capital or dominant. It will also be purple. And this one has a purple. So let's add them up. 25, 25, 25 is 75%. Okay? And that's the phenotype of purple flowers in the offspring. That means that every time these 2 parents have an offspring, they have a 75% chance of having a purple flowered offspring. Okay? And that does not change if they have 1 offspring. The next time, they have a 75% chance again for offspring number 2. Okay? You don't cross out the box because they already had 1 baby. What's the probability of a flower being yellow? So now, you could subtract and say it's 25, or you could just look and show that it's 25% because this box is the only time that that offspring will be yellow. Okay, let's go to the next one. Round pea and wrinkle pea. So let's start, and they're telling us round is dominant. They're using a capital, so that's how I'm going to know it's dominant. Wrinkled is lowercase, that's how I'm going to know it's recessive. This time I'm crossing 2 homozygous dominant with 2 homozygous or recessive alleles. Okay, so this parent, I hope you realize, is round. And anybody tell us what this parent is? Wrinkled. Okay, we're talking about peas, just like Mr. Mendel. So I'm going to take parent number 1, that's over here, and place their 2 alleles in their genotype right there. Then I'm going to take little r, and place it over here. I'm going to give you a second, so please fill out your Punnett square. If you want to go ahead, you can figure out what's going to be round and what's going to be wrinkled. All right, let's check our answers. The first one is a hybrid. Okay, it's a round because it has a dominant gene, but it is round and a hybrid for having 2 different alleles, or heterozygous round pea. Here we have same thing, always put the capital first. Same thing, and you guessed it, same thing. So very interesting. I have a round pea and a wrinkled pea. And what's the percentage they'll have round peas? 100%, because this parent only has a dominant to give. The offspring can never receive both alleles from this parent, 1 from each. Because of that, that recessive will always be hidden, always be covered, and it'll be 100%. So in this cross, they will not be able to have any wrinkled peas. 0 is correct. Okay, notice we're not having any percentages that are like 94.7. It's only going to be a percentage of 100, 75, 50, 25, and 0. Those are always going to be only our answers. Okay, take a minute to set this up. I'll give you some background. They're telling you that they're W, capital W, and be careful because the W's look the same whether they're capital or lowercase. So make sure you make them very large and very small so it's very, very clear what we're using, and only use the letter W. We're crossing over here one heterozygous rabbit with another heterozygous rabbit, okay? So this is going to be two white rabbits, right? Because they both have the dominant. And we want to see with each genotype, setting up a Punnett square, what are the percentages that they'll have white bunnies and what are the percentages they'll have brown bunnies. Please don't just guess. Please now set up your Punnett square and fill it in, and then you can do your percentages. I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, I'm going to show you how to set it up. Double check your work. Make sure you made those capitals really capital and those lowercase really lowercase. All right, first cross, second cross, third cross, fourth cross. All right, hopefully you got that correct. What percentage of the bunnies will be white? Okay, so remember, you have to have one dominant or two to be white. You can only get a brown fur bunny if you have two little W's. So when we look at the percentage and we're looking at the inside of the box, because those are the offspring, the percentage of bunnies that will be white would be yes, 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 no. So that's 25, 50, 75. The percentage of the bunnies that will be brown will be a 25% chance. Oops, sorry. Okay, if you guys would take out your genetics packet, it's the one that has the vocabulary on the front of the page. Everybody should have completed packet page 2, packet page 3, and packet page 4. Today, I'm asking that you complete packet page 5 and packet page 6. All right? Have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow.